Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We know your time is valuable, and we appreciate you spending the next 30 minutes with us. This webinar is part of our ongoing series to help MSPs grow with Apple. If you joined us last time for an episode we called Unlock the Apple Market, Empower Your MSP with Adigy, we explored the opportunities Apple device management creates for MSPs. Today, we're taking the next step, helping you structure your pricing strategy to maximize profitability and long-term success. For those who are new to Adigy, Adigy is the only multi-tenant Apple device management platform built specifically for MSPs. Our mission is to help MSPs seamlessly support Apple devices at scale, just like they do with Windows, without complexity or guesswork. Now, pricing is a topic that every MSP wrestles with, and for good reason. Whether you're starting with Apple or already managing Apple devices, getting your pricing right is essential to your business's success. So today, we're covering as much as we can on this topic in 30 minutes. And we also want this to be interactive. So throughout the session, we'll be asking a few poll questions to learn more about how you approach pricing today. So please participate. And of course, drop your questions into the Q&A section, not in the chat. Please put them in the Q&A so we don't lose track of them. And we'll answer as many as we can at the end. So speaking of interactive, we have our first poll, and that is launching right now. What percentage of your managed devices are Apple? Just so we can get an idea of the audience here in attendance. And I'll let that run for just a little bit while I do introductions. Starting with Jason Detburn. Jason is the founder and CEO of Adigy. And before starting Adigy, he spent years at Kaseya, working closely with MSPs and seeing firsthand how difficult it was to manage Apple devices at scale. So in 2014, he recognized the major gap. MSPs had powerful tools for Windows, but Apple was an afterthought. He started Adigy to change that, and today Adigy is the only multi-tenant Apple management platform built specifically for MSPs. Jason, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Ben. And I'm excited about this topic. It's not super sexy, but there's probably nothing more important to the trajectory of your business long-term than your pricing strategy. So this is a great topic. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, and it can be scary if you're trying to do it alone. So to hear what others have done is super helpful. So I'm Ben Greiner, Adigy's MSP Growth Advisor. I've been working to support Apple technology since 1998. I built a 100% Apple-focused MSP from 2006 to 2020 when I sold it to Intiva, one of the fastest growing MSPs in the US. And my former team continues to use Adigy today to manage Apple devices. I know what it takes to build a successful MSP and specifically an Apple practice, and I'm here to help other MSPs do the same. We also have with us David Chinchilla, who you may hear me call Chili, because that's how he's known here internally. And he has over a decade of experience managing technology for creative agencies in New York City, where he worked alongside outsourced managed service providers in a co-managed IT environment. And today he helps MSPs succeed on the Adigy platform, guiding them in best practices for Apple device management. And finally, our special guest, Jeff Gaines. Jeff is, and this is a rather long list, but very impressive. He's a founder, entrepreneur, tech executive with deep expertise in MSP growth, pricing strategies, and private equity. He's also a startup, consultant, investor, volunteer, baseball fan, taco aficionado, and most importantly, fun on webinars. And yes, he knows a lot about how to price MSP services profitably. And Jeff, I know you spent 8.5 years at Interlaced, which is a leading Apple-focused MSP. And today you are Senior Vice President of Growth at Lyra Technology Group. I read online that Lyra is a family of industry-leading MSPs serving small and medium-sized businesses, but I'd love to hear from you what that means and what your role is.
Yeah. First, thanks, Ben and Jason for having me and for the whole Attitude Group for having me here. That was a great intro straight off my LinkedIn profile. So I could have said it better myself. Yeah, so a little bit about Lyra Technology. Lyra Technology is the operating arm of Evergreen Services Group, and Evergreen Services Group is a private equity and investment vehicle partnering with MSPs all across North America, as well as now in England, Australia, New Zealand, and giving them a permanent place for their business to live. So once founders have run their course and ready to exit, Evergreen keeps their brand intact, keeps their business in place, keeps their leaders in place, and gives them a permanent home for their assets. So Lyra, the work we do here is partnering with our MSPs after we acquire them and just helping them do things like figure out pricing strategy, for example. So all the fun stuff we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Uh, well, actually, we have another poll, so I'm gonna jump right into this poll while we start talking about that, and that is pricing. How no, I switched the polls up just a little bit. Pricing Apple device management. So, how do you currently price your managed services? And please answer that question while we dive into some of the different scenarios here. Starting with per device versus per user. And Jeff, how did or does Interlace do their pricing?
Yeah, so Interlace still does price by user, and I think the logic here
Hmm.
is you want to set your pricing in a way that's the easiest for your customer to understand and consume. And for us, we were working with a lot of startup customers. They had a really high growth rate, and so for them, being able to just set pricing around employees, it's just like an extension of your cost to human capital. Made it really easy for them to forecast what it was going to cost them to grow from stage A to B to C and so on. So I think the big headline there is like, what is the easiest for your customers? That's probably how you want to be thinking about setting your pricing.
Yeah. I remember when I started my MSP, per device was kind of the way to go, and that seemed like the easiest for everyone. But then per user, it started to shift to a per user model. And I know a lot of companies talked about a blended model. They kind of looked at the devices, the users, the use case. Um, so did you do any type of blending like that, or was it very clearly like you have 50 users, this is the price?
Yeah, it was almost always just that simple. The exceptions would be, and probably some folks on the call have these scenarios where you have multiple devices per user, like you're in a healthcare setting or you're in an education setting, in which case you have to get a little more creative and maybe orient more around that device. But we always thought about it as, hey, you're paying your people on payroll by headcount, you might as well be paying your vendor the same way. And so we just try to make it line up that way.
Yeah, I love that. So we got about 72% response here, and I'm gonna end the poll. And I will share the results here so everyone can see it. We've got 38% saying per user, 25%, or sorry, 38% per device, 25% per user. Nobody reporting flat rate bundled, and then 38% custom, meaning they must feel they're doing, like I said, a blended rate or something like that. And Jason, do you want to, you've seen some pricing models as well over the years. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll chime in probably a little later. I think the flat, it's interesting to see that nobody's doing the flat rate bundle, at least on that's attending this webinar today. That was a big thing in the past, but making sure that you've got, as Jeff said, an easy way to consume what your service level agreements are. And the goal here is that we're trying to differentiate from the break fix things that people are used to and the nickel and diming. The big process that I always want to make sure of is what is the true cost of IT? And when your employees are down and when I'm back in there fixing things multiple times, that's costing everybody dollars and everybody money and time. And do we really know what the impact and the value that we're going to bring is? So that's one of the big ones to make sure people understand how to annotate with customers.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah,
oh, go ahead,
I would
Jeff.
love to piggyback on that, Jason. And so when you think about setting your pricing, I know like a popular thing in the MSP communities for a long time was figuring out what you wanted your gross margin to be, and then figuring out what your pricing had to be to achieve that gross margin. That's like cost price setting. And so like kind of bottoms up price setting. The other way you can do it is like thinking about what your competition is setting their pricing at and trying to like match competition, which can be sort of a race to the bottom. The way that I like to think about setting price is value price setting. And so like, what is the value you're bringing? And it's very rarely the case that you're bringing value at the device level. It's almost always the case that you're bringing value at the personnel level and the business level. And so like, I think that's where the notion of around per user pricing really holds water. Again, recognizing there are circumstances where it's just not practical. But I would encourage everyone to kind of consider where are you actually delivering value to your customers, set your pricing there.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of bringing value and being able to articulate that, and it's not just the device that you're focusing on. So that certainly
And
is
remember,
key.
it's not just the initial point of the deal, right? You got to do this on a continuous basis. One thing I always hear is I got to make sure I'm sharing with my customers why everything's humming and you still need to pay for the services. It's because I'm not crawling to your desk, polo shirts walking in every other day because things are breaking. And we've got to articulate that on an ongoing basis. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of per device, per user, and pricing on value, if we look at Mac versus Windows, I think this is both an unnecessarily complex discussion that I've heard, and also maybe contradictory to some things we just said. But the idea that when it comes to Mac versus Windows, I personally think the simplest thing is whatever you're pricing your Windows devices is what you should price your Mac devices. It's simply a different device. Um, but again, are there different opinions here, or have we seen anything else in the field where people are trying to price Windows versus Mac differently? Anyone want to chime in?
Jeff, I think you guys keep it simple, right? So in that regard, it's the same. And we've had this
Yeah.
ongoing debate about it. I think the scenario with Macs, it's not necessarily that you need to price them differently. It's just that we have to know that there is a different cost of value that's inherently there, right? So like you walk in those environments, they understand the value of paying more for a Mac than Windows, even though that gap is shrinking. And that's generally just I hate to generalize these things, but you just generally know that there's a better appetite for value and service and in a Mac environment. And that doesn't mean we got to price them more, but it also means you're not gonna have to race to the bottom as typically often as you would on a Windows commodity scenario. You walk in, there's one thing you can always say. I know you'll get a quote from some other MSP that hopes to do something a lot cheaper here. And that's where you got to sell that value, right? And the price along with it.
Yeah, sometimes you're going to get people who don't understand the Apple market and they're underpricing it. And so that's what you're competing against. And that's not really a fair comparison. But I think where this discussion started going off on the not our discussion, but the Mac versus Windows pricing discussion gets off track is so many Mac users historically have been creative professionals. And when you're supporting a standard Office worker with Microsoft Office or Google Workspace and a web browser today, that's pretty straightforward and simple. But if you're supporting a creative professional, and it doesn't matter if they're on a Mac or Windows, but they're typically on a Mac, it's more complex. It's a more complex workflow. It's more expensive software. It's fonts. It's massive amounts of storage, massive files. That is harder to support and maybe requires a different pricing model, but it's not Apple's not the reason you're pricing for that. Going back to what Jeff said, the value you're bringing in supporting that creative professional workflow versus a standard Office worker, that's the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I would think about it this way. And so I think Jason said it. We just keep it super simple, like agnostic of what the technology looks like. It's really oriented around people, and that you can poke holes in that strategy, but it has been a winning one for me over the years. I think about it this way: when what is the service you're delivering? Are you in the technology business, or are you in the professional services business, and you're trying to deliver an experience for those end users, frustration free? They're able to get their work done. They're productive. They're secure while doing so. The cost to do that on the Apple side might be a little higher because it's more complex, and so you may take that into consideration because that's additional value that you're creating. So I really think about that more from a holistic angle, like you just said, Ben. what is the total value you're bringing around that environment, that complexity, and price accordingly.
Yeah, and someone mentioned, looks like John mentioned, the higher risk in healthcare and similar orgs. I mean, that is another thing. Like if you're bringing the value of reducing risk and a very fast response time versus a more relaxed response time and less of a risk that you're managing, you should price accordingly, right? You shouldn't. I don't. And Jeff, you said you like to keep it simple, which I love. But if you're serving healthcare versus, say, a standard, professional services office, would you price the same, or could it be different because the healthcare provider's asking for more value from you?
Yeah, I think it's all about value you're creating. So what the market is demanding there, and pricing accordingly. And so if you have a high demand customer and you have a lot of penetration on your line card, all of your services and products are needed, I think that's going to drive that price up over someone that's maybe much lower touch, more quiet. I think we'd say in the MSP world, you're not getting as many tickets out of them. And
Yeah.
again, some of the tools and technology that facilitate you doing your job can help move people from that higher demand, higher touch space into that lower touch world. So I think you got to just think about what you're serving, how you're serving them, and what that pricing looks like around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always hear law offices as the consummate
Yeah.
needy one in time and response rate. And so, yeah, price it differently and then decide, do I want to continue to service that customer and the expectations that are around that, and what we want to keep delivering. So,
Yeah. And so we got to keep moving here, but last two items on our list, and we have some more slides I want to get to, but iPhones, iPads, even Apple TVs. Like I get the feeling we probably in most cases can't price them the same as a device if we're doing per device pricing. That's where the per user pricing comes in. Per user, they may have multiple devices. iPads are that kind of hybrid.
mhm.
Uh, Confusing model where they're not quite a desktop, they're not quite an iPhone. Again, I think it comes back to use case and the value that you're providing the customer. And we have some resources I'll share later in the webinar on that. But does anyone here want to quickly chime in on pricing these devices? How did you do it, Jeff? It was just included in your per user package.
Yeah, we would just bundle it, except for the rare case where maybe you had a field team where they all had iPads and we had to think about like the device level, but those would be edge cases. But we just try to keep it very simple, one price per user per month. I will say on the co-managed, one thing we learned there, it's a completely different sales motion. And so you're selling to a different customer, they have a different use case, they're getting different, there's different need for your service or product. And so that one definitely is like, it would not fit the normal template of your pricing strategy. You probably want to break that out separately.
Yeah, Jeff, and I'll jump in on that one. I think that the co-managed relationship, I think it brings a added value. The MSP is able to showcase more value in a co-managed relationship, or added value, just because you're able to potentially maybe lower the cost of what each license is or each user is, but you bring more value when you start to focus in on those specialized areas like security, compliance, and networking. The MSP can really focus on those things for the client, and the client can then just have somebody come in like a junior engineer or something like that to just handle those day-to-day tasks that they may need because their company's growing. And so sometimes I feel like MSPs do shy away from that co-managed relationship because they think that they're going to be battling for power or something like that. But instead, they can actually kind of double down and help that internal IT to just be stronger and more efficient. And there's a big piece there with the compliance and the networking, that MSPs having those bigger teams, more experience, they're able to really double down and bring more value to that relationship. So I think that that's a nice piece to highlight there.
Yeah, I want to stress the co-managed piece. I know we got a lot to move to, but I'll just cap it off here. Is that we see MSPs that it's a different go-to-market motion. We obviously have to manage them a little bit differently, but done well, we're doing highly scalable services with them and less noisy bits that they can do internally and do really well on a high-touch model. And if we have the right processes in place, it can be a win-win for everyone in large environments with scale, with really, really good profit margins, and everybody wins in the process. So it takes a little more work to think about, but I think a lot of MSPs basically go, well, we can't do everything all in-house, so we got to send them astray. And that doesn't have to be the case. Growing with those customers into a co-managed environment is an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, we had a lot of great here in Chicago, where my MSP is based. We had a lot of great co-managed relationships where the in-house IT team knew that they were built for Windows, and to build that equivalent on the Apple side was too expensive. It made more economic sense to outsource to a team like us, where we could bring these special tools, solutions, and expertise. And we priced it accordingly, and we brought the value, and sometimes it was one of our most profitable lines of business. So definitely take a look at co-managed relationships. Okay, let's move on because we got 10 minutes left. Struggles, excuse me, and we have another poll, and it is, what's your biggest challenge? Let me launch this. Launch.
Yeah, as you're doing that, I'm gonna tee this up. I think one of the things
Yeah.
that I talk to MSPs over the journey of growth that they have, and if I ask all of you guys listening here, do you feel like you're providing higher quality services today than you were 3 years ago or 4 years ago? Well, if that's the case, then you're gonna have to be representing the value of that quality over time too. Your costs are going up with your own employees, et cetera, and so most of our MSPs talk about they want to deliver more value and obviously price differently, but the fear of driving that becomes a challenging perspective. And I think, Jeff, you've got a really great perspective on, how you see companies where they're at when you guys are looking to partner with them, and then even afterwards, how they build discipline around that, right?
Yeah, I think so like the hardest thing to do is action some massive price increase across your entire customer base. It's scary. Your customers are going to get sticker shock if you do it. It's going to create friction in your relationship. It's much easier just to do year over year incremental increases, if for no other reason than just to keep pace with the cost of inflation. So 3 or 4% year over year. At Interlace, we built those right into our contracts, and it wasn't like we were getting more profitable. We were just protecting against margin erosion year over year because of that. And then I think Jason, to your other point is like, if you're increasing the value of your offering over time, you're introducing new service or product, or you're refining the way that you deliver that service or product, you absolutely are within bounds to go back and open a negotiation around increasing that price, just to kind of keep pace with where you're at today. And again, we've seen that, at Interlace, I was in business there for 8 years before we partnered with Evergreen. And over that 8 years, we tried everything in the kitchen sink around pricing, right? We bundled different things. We tried different value propositions. And so you pull up 8 years later and you sort of have a hodgepodge of different contract structures and terms. And we just did an exercise where we just said, okay, we map all of our legacy contracts to our current offerings. What does that get us? Where's the price delta? And then how do we go back and start negotiating, maybe not all at once, but negotiating to get people up to like the current fair market value of what you're offering. And it's a huge needle mover for your business. If you are looking to sell your business in the future, the person that buys it is going to do that exact exercise once they buy it. So you might as well do it for yourself now and pull that value forward for yourself. And it makes your business more attractive on paper as well to be run that well.
Yeah, and your customer cohort is going to adapt with that. So if you're changing your services over time and providing more and more quality, some of your customers are not going to map to that change in value, and that's okay. That should be good. You're gonna have to let some of them go because you're not the right mix for them. They need to find the trunk slammers, as we call it, to fulfill their their cost value initiative.
So yeah, here's the for those in attendance here, we've got the highest percentage justifying the cost to clients, which again, I think that's a struggle on both Apple and Windows, but it's something you need to define and find your value. And Jeff mentioned earlier, and once you've done that, don't overcomplicate it. If you're moving from Windows to Apple, just add Apple to your pricing. the same as you do Windows. Even if you feel like you're not as good at it or you still need to get up to speed, you'll get there, and we can help you get there. I do think one of the challenges in my experience that MSPs have justifying the cost of Apple devices when it comes to services is, and it's touched on a little bit in that last question, clients expect Apple support for free, is basically MSPs have been giving it away for free for too long. They've been ignoring it. They've been abdicating to the customer. They've been saying, don't worry about it. And now with security changes, which I'm jumping around here, but Jeff, you mentioned it. You got to go back to your clients when things change and the needs change. You got to go back to your clients and say, hey, we've got to change the pricing and the relationship, because what you need from us and what you're asking from us is different and more than what we started out with, even a few years ago. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this.
I have one question as you're doing that for Jeff here too, because I see a decent amount on the poll, 22% competing with other MSPs on the pricing side. Now that's obviously maybe when you're getting the deal done at the beginning, but then ongoing, right? Ongoing at some point, you've got these just general competitive pressures. But I use this analogy quite often because it's all around communication and expectation management. I always say that if your wife stops talking to you, that's when you have a real problem. It's the same with customers. When they've really stopped talking to you, then they've kind of probably even moved on. So it comes down to the cadences and the comms of value. What did you guys build in to ensure you had a healthy cohort, or even how your partners today think about that ongoing relationship so you can make sure that you've got low risk?
Yeah, totally. I think so at Lyra, we've got over 80 MSPs, and our most successful MSPs, and most of them have some kind of account management or customer success function, just kind of carrying that torch forward. It's not only a conduit for the client to be able to give feedback to the business, the MSP, it's also a way for the MSP to communicate those things like changes in your offering, additional value you can bring to their organization. Inevitably, their business, your customers' businesses are evolving. If they're in business still, they're growing, they're doing something right, they're changing every day. And so you need to be able to keep pace with that and make sure that you're being able to plug those holes that are opening up as their business changes. One thing I was thinking about when I saw the justifying costs and competing with other MSPs being a real pain point for the group, absolutely hear that. I think just doing an exercise around what makes you different from your competition, truly different, like a go-to-market exercise around why you stand out in your market, will eliminate a lot of that chatter. You're always going to have pricing pressure, and you're going to have to talk about that kind of stuff. But the better you can sharpen your pitch around why you're different and you're better than your competitors in a very specific way to your core audience, the better you're going to stand out, win those deals at a higher rate. And I just don't see enough MSPs doing that. It's like, if you look across the industry, very homogenized messaging around cybersecurity and help desk and things like that. And so really going beyond serving that technology and thinking about what you're doing for those businesses, I think is the true unlock here. I know we said that to start the conversation, and so I'm bringing it full circle.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
It's not bludgeoning them with IT language. It's keeping clear, simple, reiterative value proposition ongoing. And so one of the things I see too is making sure that you have maintained a roadmap with them, so you can say, hey, look, this is where we're looking to go. This is what we're doing today. This is what we're going to look to do tomorrow. And that history and that knowledge, that does help to ensure that, hey, I have to, even though these other MSPs can take over my technology, they don't understand my business and my roadmap and the pathways that we've got to get there efficiently. That's a really important ongoing point.
Yeah, so we only have a couple minutes left, so I want to wrap this up. The conversation doesn't have to end here, obviously, but this slide here, we've already talked about it. Avoid underpricing, and some of that is just raising your rates periodically, once a year, probably ideally, communicating your value, and then charging premium when it makes sense, when you are delivering that value to those special markets. I have a few more things to say about that, but I want to mention a couple resources. And this is not an advertisement per se, because we're not getting paid by the Tech Tribe, but we are members of the Tech Tribe, and they have fantastic resources. And Nigel wrote a great book about pricing, and he has calculators, and he has communication templates, and even has a template on if you don't raise your rates, you still want to send out that yearly letter saying, we didn't raise your rates. Look at those great, we added value, but we didn't raise your rates. So you make it a process and a cadence every month, every year you're sending that letter out. Addigy also has great resources. At Addigy, we know that MSPs need more than just a platform. So we created the tools to communicate your value and sell Apple management services effectively. And these are just a few of them that I've highlighted. Communication templates for device compliance, for Microsoft conditional access, using Microsoft conditional access with Addigy. And I want to highlight the newest one around building a go-to-market strategy for iPhone and iPad. This includes detailed pricing examples. So if you are an Addigy customer, please, and you don't have this resource yet, please let me know so that I can get it into your hands and you can take a look at it. These resources are designed to help you not just manage Apple devices, but also sell and price those services effectively. And I do see we have one. Well, we have one question. I'll get to that in a minute, but it just popped up. So in summary, I want to reiterate how pricing is more than just numbers. It's a mindset that you need to understand. And I've spent entire days at conferences learning about pricing. And I remember moving my MSP from hourly pricing to flat rate retainer fee in 2006. Followed by, as Jeff said, years and years of iterating and trying different things and seeing what worked. And what I have learned, what I remember learning is, pricing is emotional, and everyone has a different view of pricing. So just because a customer is small doesn't mean they don't have the budget to pay premium for your services. If you've ever asked a group of people how much they are willing to pay for a pair of shoes, a watch, or a car, you get vastly different answers. So we all have a different view of pricing. But you also have to believe in your pricing, right? You can't just say, oh, well, Jeff said I should do this, I'm going to do it. Because if you don't believe that you can do it, they're going to smell that. Prospect's going to smell that on you, right, Jeff?
That's right.
Yeah, and I'm really that last point is really important before we wrap up, is that not only do you have to believe in it, you got to make sure that that customer believes and understands the value that you're bringing. And if they don't, they're very likely going to leave you at some point for somebody who's going to sell it for a nickel cheaper, right? And that's not the kind of long-term customer you need in your portfolio. That's hard to say when revenue seems to solve all problems, but it's not when they become an anchor in your portfolio overall. And then you got to separate them as well too. They've got to understand the value you're delivering for that price and be on board with it. Otherwise, they're going to be so price sensitive that they'll be gone next month.
Yeah. So this is our last poll. How often do you raise your rates? And I will say, I recall hearing, and I think it's true, that if you don't get some pushback on your rates, then your rates are too low. A small percentage of people will always complain about price, even if it's free. That's their default response, to complain about it. So you need some of that pushback to know that that your prices are right. Don't just think the pushback is like, don't go down the rabbit hole of, oh, my prices are too high. Obviously, if everyone's saying that, maybe they're too high, but. So okay, so let's see. I'm going to end the poll. And we got about a third saying yearly and 63% saying sporadically. So to those 63%, I would say get on a yearly cadence. If you're looking for more guidance on pricing or want to explore how Addigy's resources can help, feel free to reach out. We're happy to share what we've learned and point you toward the best tools available. I do see we have a question. Are you going to show pricing examples on a pricing call? We have examples in that document I shared earlier. Those are very detailed examples. And so I don't know if this question came from a customer or not, but if you're a customer, we can certainly share those. So I want to wrap up here because I know we've gone just a little bit over, and say thank you for spending the last 30 minutes with us. Pricing is one of the most important and sometimes most challenging aspects of running an MSP. And the fact that you're here shows that you're committed to getting it right. So we believe that Apple device management is not just an add-on, it's a real business opportunity for MSPs to grow, differentiate, and drive profitability. And we're here to support you every step of the way, not just with our platform, but with the resources, best practices, and a community of MSPs who are scaling Apple management successfully. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next webinar, which we have one next week. We have a pseudo talk where we're going to talk about our new Addergy Assist. We're also going to be at Kaseya Connect Global in Las Vegas next month. And in May, we're going to be at the ACES conference in Austin, Texas. So any last thoughts from Jason or Jeff?
No, not me. I mean, I feel like Jeff has some scar tissue in the emotional side of pricing. If you could leave us with a lasting thought there, it'd be awesome.
I just say it's okay to experiment with it, and like you said, see what sticks. See if you're getting some pricing pressure, you're probably doing something right. And so, I would encourage everyone to just try, give it a good experimentation, and see where it takes you. Beyond that, it was a pleasure being here. Everyone, connect with me on LinkedIn. Love talking with the MSP community. So happy to continue the conversation outside this call.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you, Jeff. Bye.
Bye, guys.